We begin with a community still in mourning.
I ran through the door and I just seen bodies everywhere. And everywhere you turned, it was just another person laying on the ground. It was blood everywhere.
Anyone could have been here. And it is just, and it just hurts. Our community is in pain. We're mourning.
We as a people, as a community, we are fed love. We love one another. I don't care how many times we fight and argue, we still love one another. You don't see us coming to y'all communities killing people, shooting your daughters and your mother and your aunts and uncles. No.
We know that racism exists, no matter how people try to sweep it under the rug of something that was happening that long ago is not. Like, this is an ongoing issue with this country. This is domestic terrorism, and it needs to be called out as such. And there is a war on Black communities in this country.
Residents in Buffalo, New York are still processing the loss of 10 of their own to a racist, hateful mass shooting. They were joined Tuesday by President Biden, who, alongside the First Lady, visited a makeshift vigil. During his speech, the president mourned each victim, condemned white supremacy, and called the attack a clear case of domestic terrorism. The president's visit comes as we learn more about how lethal and brutal 18-year-old Peyton Gendron's plans were. The Washington Post reports he planned the attack over the course of several months and visited the grocery store he attacked in March to monitor the store's security and map out its aisles. And an NBC analysis of online chat logs that appear to belong to the shooter suggests he considered attacking other locations, including an elementary school and churches. So just think about that for a second. The shooter wanted to turn places of peace and refuge for communities into beacons of terror. His intentions made even clearer through his manifesto, in which he repeatedly cites a man from New Zealand, a white supremacist shooter who killed 51 people after attacking 2 different mosques in New Zealand back in 2019. And that was his inspiration. Over the last few years, we've seen places of normalcy turned into backdrops of terror. As NBC highlights, just in the last week alone, we've seen that every day settings like grocery stores, hair salons, and churches are no longer off limits. Joining me now, Reverend William Barber. He is the co-chair of the Poor People's Campaign. And Reverend, I always cite you in that you identified very, very early on that we would live through another redemption-like period in this moment post-Obama, and the emergence of Donald Trump. Speak to that parallel in American history when Reconstruction ended, but also when the Civil Rights Movement and that progress and the backlash to that. Where do you see the connections between prior moments in American history where there was progress made, and then there was a racist and violent backlash as a response?
Well, violence was hate, and it wasn't just about people hating somebody because of the color of their skin. It was about hating policy, because the redemption movement of the late 1800s said we have to take our country back. And by that they meant take voting rights back, take any kind of educational progress back, take political power back, because they saw those things as a threat to their existence. You see, in that mindset of redemption and destruction, anybody's gain is their loss. And so we saw it, and it culminated with the president in the White House quoting the movie Birth of a Nation as good media. What we're seeing today, the way former President Trump spews this language about something being destroyed, and preachers talk about wokeism and being against that, and the target of critical race theory, and Tucker Carlson and Fox News and all the people that sponsor them, allowing him to promote all of this racist rhetoric. It's just like Woodrow Wilson in the 1900s saying that the birth of the nation was good history. And that, what did it show? It showed that somehow Black people working together had done the nation damage, and it needed to be taken over. And what did it lead to? Violence. It led to killing. It led to attacks on communities. So we see this happening. Even, my sister, public policy today is too often framed. Voting rights is framed as an attack on democracy. Somebody stealing something. We have to stop them. Healthcare is, they're going to take away from you. They're going to break the economy. It's played off in racist terms that somehow what they want to promote is that America didn't have a racist history, and black and brown and poor people are just takers. They must be stopped. And the replacement theory pushed to the nth degree means somebody has to be killed. Because if you're going to replace me, eventually you got to get rid of me. This is a very dangerous time with rhetoric and a society where you can easily weaponize somebody with armor and guns of mass destruction who get caught up in this. This is not an anomaly. This is something that is sown over and over again. And this is why we see it playing out.
One of the things I think a lot about is something you said recently, which is the folks who amplify what you call death-dealing language, the folks that spread hate speech and incite violence in this particular way. I mean, how do we marginalize those people? Because they're not going to disappear into thin air. It's not like magic. So the role for the rest of us who believe in democracy, but also at the end of the day, human dignity, that everybody deserves human dignity in life. How do we marginalize those voices that are death-dealing?
Yeah. Well, first of all, we have to point out the death-dealing in language and in the policies. One of the things I'm saying to folks, when we're talking about denying health care and living wages, we have to talk about how people die. People died, for instance, in the pandemic because of the refusal to treat poor and low-wealth people in black and brown and poor communities right. We got to call it what it is. Secondly, we've got to challenge these funders, these corporate sponsors that sponsor these networks that spew all this stuff all the time. We look, it's not just Tucker Carlson, for instance, it's who's behind him, who's funding him, who keeps him on the air. Thirdly, we must have a moral reset. And that's why on June 18th, we're having this mass Poor People's Low-Wage Workers Assembly moral march on Washington to the polls. I didn't know this would happen, certainly wish it hadn't. But there has to be a coming together and people saying, you're not just attacking black people, you're attacking all of us, you're attacking our democracy, you're attacking our future, and we must change this language from just being about left versus right, conservative versus liberal. What about looking at every piece of public policy through the lens of the Constitution? Does it provide for the common defense? Does it establish justice? Maybe that's the language we ought to be using instead of language that automatically pits us against one another. And we have to have mass movement. Think about what Rosa Parks did when Emmett Till killed. She went home and organized a movement. She said, if you kill one of our boys through the system of Jim Crow, we're going to take down the whole system of Jim Crow. And we're going to do it nonviolently. We're going to do it with love and justice and organizing. And that's the same thing here. There are more of us, but we can't sit out. We've got to stop sitting out of elections. We've got to stop sitting out of mass gatherings. We must have a coming together. We must have a more massive moral reset. And we must say, all of us together. That's why I hope that this situation, while it happened in a poor black community, and by the way, that grocery store was the only one they had. So even before this happened, this was a food desert. It was a place of poverty. I hope all of us, regardless of race, creed, and color, will come together in a massive way and say, not on our watch. And we will show that we're not going to stand for it in the streets, in the voting booths, and in the political suites.
Last question on last minute here. You mentioned that we need a moral reset. So many on the right and the conservative movement, enter into these debates from a place of feeling morally superior on these issues. But you're also a man of faith. They use their faith to push their agenda. How can people of faith on the left or people of faith along the spectrum also reach that moral high ground so that we can have a moral reset, as you say?
Well, we have to challenge a lot of heresy that's going on. Frederick Douglass did it. He said, because I love the religion of Jesus, I hate the religion of the slave master. And we can't have the mind by himself. We must say no. A moral, Christian, or godly position is not hating gay people and hating women's right to choose to tax guns. A real true moral agenda is caring for the rest of these, the hungry, the sick, the marginalized, the left out, not just in personal rhetoric and personal activity, but in public policy. And then we must take a look. Too many folk are staying out of the political process. That's why gun laws exist as they are. That's why people control Senate, control the Congress, control the House. I listen to these pundits right now. They're saying, well, nothing's going to change. Everything's going to go a certain way in the fall. Well, do you know, actually, it doesn't have to be that way. The poor and low wealth people, the folk that have not voted, that are already registered, if politicians talk to them and mobilize them, they are the sleeping giant that can bring the kind of numbers to the polls that could send a lot of these folk home with their racism, could send them home with their ugliness and let them think about it. They don't have to be in office. But when we stand down, when we're not fully engaged, then that becomes the problem. We cannot let people, we cannot voluntarily allow people to replace us. There must be more engagement. So again, let me quote Frederick Douglass. Now, there was a lot of violence during Frederick Douglass after the Dred Scott decision said this violence will also and intensify agitation for the things that are just and right. That's what must happen in this moment. Just like the devotees of the civil rights movement, they ask the question, not just who killed the person, but and they challenge the systems and they organize, they mobilize in every aspect. That's what we must do in this moment.
Organize and mobilize. Reverend William Barber, thank you so much for starting us off today. Please stay safe. Hi, I'm Zerlina Maxwell. Thanks for checking out our channel on YouTube. You can see more from Zerlina by clicking any of the videos on this screen, and make sure you subscribe below to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. Thanks for watching.